Hey, Nat, good morning for me and good evening to you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure and a privilege.
Absolutely, yeah. And we get a chance to talk today about my one of my favorite topics, which is anything related to reporting. And I actually had an ability to give you a shout out yesterday because I just finished presenting at PASS. So I had two sessions within 2 hours of each other, both yesterday afternoon. Interestingly enough, they used the same word. One is it's um, avoid reporting pitfalls was number one, which I actually used you and two other tools as the end conversation of three tools, current and upcoming, that can do auto scanning of report problems. And then I had an avoid data silos was my second one. So it's basically essentially best practices for reporting, best practices for data modeling, between the two of them. But you definitely got a nod and an encouragement for anybody in the audience to, like, I'm going to do a stream with you today. So if you liked this content,
Amazing.
check out the deep dive that we're doing together, because I'm going to certainly be learning a lot about your tool. So I was glad to be able to give it a mention one day before we actually went live.
That's brilliant. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah, and since it's your first time on my channel, I'd love to give you a chance to introduce yourself a little bit, kind of who you are and your role within Microsoft, and also some background on the tool that you built.
Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity. So I'm Nat Van Gulck. I'm a cloud solution architect in the data and AI team at Microsoft UK. The tool I'm going to present, however, is a completely what I like to call now a community project, open source. That is not supported by Microsoft, but is a great example of what we can do now. Using the Power BI developer mode, right? The PBIP file format. And so I hope you'd be excited about that. So part of my role at Microsoft is to help customers be successful with Power BI, and now, of course, with Fabric as well. And so this endeavor is very much part of this, and making customers successful,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly spending less time manually testing Power BI reports, for example, right? And also improving the quality of the visual output specifically.
Yeah, and I think it's we're we're in a kind of a new era of stuff. Certainly, one, because I think the Tyndall language that's come out, that's allowed the data set language to be a lot more readable. I think we're going to continue to see a lot more improvements in desktop hardening and just exposure of one button fixes and improvements, changes, and other stuff, where it'll be much easier to make model edits without having to be technical, because other people will be the technical people for you. And it's only a matter of time until we get like more of a RIMDL, a report definition language that will be whatever it ends up getting called for the Power BI front end, because it makes sense logically as a natural evolution of all of this. And tools like yours, and there's some other ones that have come out. So like it's cool to go from nothing to all these practices that I've been touting for years on, number of visuals on a page, making sure that if they're layered, maintain layer order turned on, all this other stuff to consider that. uh, I'll give you this best practice, but also have fun doing this 55 times, because that's unfortunately the only way to do it officially. Like, people have hacked apart the file, but that also then voids your warranty, so to speak, with Microsoft support if you actually do that. So I'm glad that we're starting to get tools that can at least give you a summarized list of what to do. And maybe in like a year or two, these same tools will also have a button to do those fixes for you, kind of like in Tableau Editor. But at least we can give a list of what to go look at, rather than blindly searching around or needing to look at blog posts of recommendations of what to do.
Yeah, definitely. So there's that, and certainly you can show this as an example with, what a PBI Inspector offers around what I call the base rule files. A set of base rules that is a good idea to just make sure that your report actually ticks the boxes in that respect. But I think, as we discussed before, previously, Reed, the thing about the visual layer is that sometimes it's very specific to an organization's center of excellence, right, for business intelligence reports. And so it's also very important, I think, to have these rules, completely customizable, and create, of course, new ones, just to check all sorts of things. So, all sorts of visual properties, etc.
Exactly. And I think with a lot of these, I believe yours started with the rule set that Michael Kowalski essentially created a few years ago, right?
Yeah, so I've been talking to Michael, and he's giving me, showing me, the rules that he had created
Mhm.
and thought about, and then we expanded together a bit on those rules, and I can go through some of them. The list of base rules that we have at the moment is very much, preliminary, and I'll be keeping adding to those rules, and
Yep.
also very, very keen to hear from the community about what, other rules, which other rules would be useful, and also perhaps even necessary. And so keen to get some feedback on that, right? So the PBI Inspector GitHub repo's got an ideas, section in the discussion area, and so feel free to add some ideas there, right? I think there's a couple already. One which is quite interesting around color contrast, and checking color contrast.
So
And
you'd have to
for
run it
access,
against because there's a I know Megan Longoria is the one who is like essentially unofficially the accessibility queen, and she's actually even mentioned that she never planned to become that. It was just I think she had one of her ex-boyfriends at one point had a particular color difference, which caused her to go into that. But I know she has a couple of tools that actually lets you determine that rate, because there's a certain specific ratio where it's either passes or fails in terms of like it's a 4-to-1 or 5-to-1 between adjacent colors that are next to each other on the page based off of the standardization for that, if I'm remembering correctly.
yeah, and there's definitely guidelines and from the WCAG, etc.
Yep.
guidelines, right, for color contrasting that are well documented, and so it should be completely possible to
Yep.
to implement those and check for them as an example, right?
Yeah, because
And
there's essentially a library that just that knows that hex color A and hex color B. It knows the ratio between the two of them. Like it's already
exactly that.
pre-mapped. So you're not scanning it from the image. You're looking up on a table the two things, and it knows the distance between them essentially.
It's exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, things like that. I'm sure once your tool solidifies and all the others do, I'll probably have a central repository where it's like regardless of which tool you use for any of this stuff, here's the practices that you can take and hopefully just plug into any of those. So whether or not it's a file or like a block of code, but I'm almost done with my theme file that I'm going to at some point do a video on for like Mike Carlos theme generator. I'm still tweaking it to get it absolutely perfect, but I will definitely have I'm hoping myself and a lot of other MVPs and experts will have their own list of what they consider to be the practices that they look at from the report layer, to allow people to kind of just plug and play that.
yeah, right. That'd be super interesting to see. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Whenever you're ready to, if you'd like, we can flip over and like take a look at where they can get access to the tool itself, and then some of the demos.
yeah, I've got basically it's all demos today.
Mhm.
So first of all, yeah, just starting with the GitHub repo. I think I shared a link with you, Reed. So
Yep.
if you're able to share that with the folk on the
Got in the
call.
description.
Yeah, so this is the public repo, right? And it's completely open source, and there's a nice description of how to get started. Hopefully, it's a nice description, and you can follow it. We also have a custom rules guide. It's a little bit light at the moment, but I'll keep adding to it. So hopefully, it'll make sense as to how you create rules. But we'll go through some of that today, so you should get a much better idea, right? And regarding the ideas, you'll be able to add ideas in this section here. So I would very much appreciate to your contribution for sure. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so let me show you then how PBI Inspector works. So just to go back to the repo, I was just going to say, so there's two things about PBI Inspector. So it runs on the report author's desktop, right? So to analyze local files, but it also can run as a command line interface, integrated with, for example, Azure DevOps can be called from Azure DevOps pipelines, and we shall see that later. And so there we are. So let me just run through then show you how it works, right, locally. So you have a local report, and I borrowed this from my colleague Ruri Romano, who's a program manager, right, for Power BI at Microsoft. And so you want to check various visual properties, etc., of this report. Now, you may know that when you save this as a Power BI P file, right, in the new Power BI developer mode, this is what you end up with, right? Let me hopefully I'm opening the right. So this is okay. So this is the report.json file, right? That is the definition of the report layout in JSON format. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm just starting with the obvious here, because the sections here are the actual pages, and then you have then for each page you've got an array of visual containers, which are visuals. Yeah. And for each of them, the important thing for each of these visuals is this nested JSON string in here.
Yep.
Right. So a stringified JSON, and that's the way it is currently. And so you need to go and query those various attributes, etc. Within that, perhaps just visually is quite hard to do, right? You probably have to copy this and open a new tab in Visual Studio Code and remove those
Exactly.
backslashes, etc. Right? Okay, but you've got quite a lot more in this file. So there's a very, very long report config file here, and this contains contains about the bookmarks and the report local settings as well. They're all in here, and so there's things there you might want to check as well. Okay, so let me show you some example rules then. Right, this is going to be, I've got a file called read rules in here that I prepared, and I just wanted to run through them one by one, right, and explain to you how they work. I'm going to start with very, very simple PBI desktop, PBI Inspector rules, and then just build upon them and then achieve more interesting rules. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So the way you define rules in PBI Inspector is also happens to be in JSON, right? And so we've got a number of so-called PBI entries, and this could be report layout, which is what I showed you. And we can also check report themes as well, right? And other
Can
JSON.
you do me a favor and if you can just increase the
Zoom in?
text size just a little bit? Yep.
Absolutely.
Say like by one or two toggles or. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
Tell me if that's better. Is that too much?
No, that should be fine. Yep.
Right.
I know some people occasionally watch on mobile, so that will be a better font size.
Yeah, but also we're talking about accessibility, checking for accessibility, so this needs to be accessible as well, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so very simply, the way a rule works, right? I've got a simple rule here, and it's checks that 1 is equal to 1. So just starting with the exciting things first, right? And currently it's disabled, so I'm going to go and enable that. Okay, and we define that the rule, if it fails, going to just return a warning, and the path will come onto that later. Yeah, but I just wanted to focus on the test. So the test is a bit of logic in here, and then followed by some data mapping logic that we haven't defined for this rule. And this is the expected result. So we expect to see, that 1 is equal to 1 just returns true, right?
Yep.
Okay. And so what I can do is, see, I've got this file here, so I can start, PBI Inspector desktop in here. I'm mapping to the sales report that I showed you earlier. That is the Power BI report, specifying this rules file. If you can see that, hopefully it's not too small. And what I'm doing here, I'm just saying I want to see the output and use the temporary files in my machine as output, the output directory, and we're just going to return the results in HTML format. So I'm going to go and run this. Okay. Right, let me just, it's because I didn't save the file. So let me just save this rules file and start again. Okay. So you see, we've got the rule has passed. Check that 1 is equal to 1, that's passed, yeah? Of course, we're going to go and look at more advanced examples. Let me just go to the right window. And so what you can also do is you can also nest operators, right? And so here simply, very, very quickly, we're looking at, checking that 3 is greater than 1 and then 1 is less than 3, right? And we can wrap that in an AND operator. And again, we expect that to be true, yeah? So you can also do that sort of thing. Let me just turn this off, and I won't run this one because it should be obvious, right? And if you wonder what runs this, what is this logic, where it comes from, essentially it is from, is essentially just running JSON logic, which is another open source framework, right? Which enables you to create rules in JSON, right? And just, runs these rules. So that's what it is. That's what PBI Inspector uses. Yeah.
I'm just pasting that link into the chat. JSON logic.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So that's what powers PBI Inspector, really. And so, but the great thing is that then you can also, in the data mapping logic, you can create, variables. So here I'm mapping, 1 to parameter 1 and 1 to parameter 2. And here we're just calling out these, these variables, and we check that they are equal, right? So this is going to return true again. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just building up the rule to show you things. Okay. Now, just using these data mapping, you can also, we're going to map parameter 1 to A, string A, and then parameter 2, we're going to use a JSON array, right? Map that to a JSON array. And in this rule, we're asking if parameter 1A is in parameter 2, this array, yeah? And okay, again, that's going to return true. And the reason I'm showing you this is that this is JSON, right?
Yeah.
JSON value, and remember that report.json is JSON as well, right? So we can go and map values from the report.json to these parameters and then check for run rules against that, right? So that's how it works.
Okay.
So for example, remember that big config, escape config at the top of the report.json file? Yeah.
Yes.
That contains a number of values like the slow data source setting values, and so we can go and find them in the config file. Sorry, in the config in the report.json file, but this config value here at the top. Yeah. In here, there's some slow data source setting value. Yeah. So here, can you see that?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we're just checking whether you are disabling cross highlighting, for example. Yeah. in your report, and some other settings. So what you can do, if you wanted to check those settings, you can go and map those various settings to a path, a JSON path, right, in the document, and then this is the value that's populated from this slow data source setting is highlighting disabled, yeah, and then we can go and check that all of these settings in here, right? Okay, so we're saying is any of these, right, set to false, and then we compare that to true. So I don't know if I've explained this very well, but hopefully you can see that you can check configuration settings quite easily like that.
Yep. Well, it's certain universal attributes where you're determining based off of your design if any of these are on or off. Like, I mean, if you have a practice where everything should be cross filter, not cross highlight, that's an easy thing to check.
Yeah, exactly. And this sort of thing is actually really good because, you got all these local report settings, but you want to make them consistent across reports, right? And so you want to make sure that you've set them, the same way against the same data source so that it's consistent from report to report. Yeah. But here's something that's a bit more tangible, right? And I'll actually run this as a demo. And it's a slightly useless rule for now. I just wanted to show it to you as an example. Yeah. So you want to check that charts are wider than they are tall in your report pages. Yeah. So here's what we can do. So we can say for each sections, remember that's a page. Yeah. We want to check the visual containers. That's the visuals. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
These are specified as so-called JSON paths. Yeah. So we can point to various JSON nodes in the document. Yeah. And here we're saying, okay, just pass the whole of the visuals config array to the logic, right, for each page. And so then for each page, we go in and check the visuals width, right, against its height, and check that the width is greater than the height. Yeah.
I feel like there's the ratio that you can determine at one point where the number of categories, and I don't know if that actually can be identified or not, but like let's assume you only have a 100 pixel wide column chart, but it's displaying 45 categories, essentially like avoiding the scroll bars, because I'm not a fan outside of tables. I don't like my visuals to have a scroll bar normally. One exception being small multiples. Curiously, is there anything in the JSON that actually indicates that a scroll bar is visible in the visual or not? Or is that all identifiable in the code?
You know what? That's I don't think that you'll be able to see that a scroll bar is visible. I could be wrong.
Probably need to almost document it. You'd have to, like, in theory, then you'd have to probably make a visual. Let's assume you make it at 200 pixels and you start adding categories to it until it pops up, and then you can determine, okay, approximately at a ratio of 1.5 categories per 10 pixels or something. If it passes that ratio, you will likely have a scroll bar. Therefore, you can create a flag from it. So you just need to know the ratio of pixels to number of categories from the query plan. But again, I don't know if you could actually access the query plan though, unfortunately, either.
Well, that's a good question. Something that needs to be looked at. But you could create, based on some criteria. You can create some rules that essentially flag up a warning that there may be a scrolling going on for sure. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So that it is an interesting one now. So let me just really quickly just build on that. And so let me just run this rule, right, very quickly, and then we'll this one, sorry. Let me just make sure that we run this rule against the report again. Okay. Okay, so essentially it's determined that in the sales detail page of the report that we looked at earlier, there is a chart that is wider, a chart that is actually taller than it is wide, and we can see that, we can see this probably this one, yeah. But it'd be more useful, right, in this HTML output with the wireframe if we could actually identify the visual, right, in question automatically, right? So let me show you how this is done. Okay, so here I'm just gonna set this to true again. So we disable this one and we move on to next rule. Okay, so here, what we do, we return the name of the visual. So we filter the visuals config array, right? And for those visuals that have the width is narrower than the height, right? And we return the visual name, okay? And then the PBI inspector will say, oh, okay, I know what that visual is, and I'm going to highlight it for you in the HTML output, right? So so very quickly, let me show you that. So I didn't want to run all the rules at once. That's why I'm doing this. Right, let me just run through this. Okay, so hopefully we should see that now. I'm going to run this. Time now. Okay, it's a bit slower, right? Okay, so you see now, we can check that we've highlighted that this visual is failing the test, and because it's being returned now by the rule, yeah. And so PBI inspector is able to run the wireframe and highlight that visual, yeah.
Beautiful. And I also like the wireframe. I think is very useful for context. It doesn't really make sense to not be able to at least see where on the page some of this stuff is being impacted. So that it's helpful to find what they need to adjust.
Yeah. And because I've specified that the result should be so-called verbose, we also showing all the passes of the rules. Otherwise you would only see the failures. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's move on a little bit more. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm just going to show you some more sample rules. We can also check that, for example, that certain charts have both axis title showing. Sorry.
One from Bernat just to pop up. So we talked about it a little bit earlier. But what's your thoughts on if the report layer is just going to stay in this nested JSON?
In the nested JSON or stay as JSON?
Is the report layer going to stay in JSON in the future is the question.
Okay, so just to clarify, so I'm a cloud solution architect at Microsoft. So the real person, right, is Rory Romano, program manager, yes, who knows about the roadmap, etc. But for now, right, JSON is is what it is today, and there's no, from my point of view, there's no indication that's going to change. But
yeah,
for now.
They will be finishing up with Tyndall, and then I think all of us are very much wishing that the next focus of their energy will be the report definition language once Tyndall is finished up, as they're still polishing up a little bit of that.
Right. Yeah. Right. That's cool. Yeah. So show visual access titles. I guess this is an example of how complex the rule. You can have really quite expressive rules, right, in PBI Inspector, and again we loop through the visuals array for each page. In this case, we just make sure that we're only checking certain types of visuals, like these, for example. I could add some more if I wanted, or remove some, yeah. And I'm just checking that only returning those visuals that fail, that don't have an x-axis, which is your category axis in JSON, and y-axis, Yeah, the title. So we're looking for the title in each. Yeah, so that's how it works, and hopefully you can kind of see how this rule just works really. So yeah, here's an interesting one, I think. So what if you wanted to, you've got visual interactions in Power BI, and you can change the interactions. You can set it to none for certain visuals. So for example, you may not want to have an image as a target for an interaction, right? Because it's not necessary, and it's not going to do anything. And so we can test this. It's quite it's quite a bit to this rule.
So
yeah.
Can a slicer pass a I thought like shapes and images were exempt from like from having a query set to it just because they didn't have any data in them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to show you what I mean. So
Okay.
You see this report in here. There's the image, which I guess is the logo, right? And if we go to edit interaction and select this, right? You see for now, this is set to filter. It could be set to none.
I'm actually surprised there's even a filter that can be passed to that. For some reason, I thought they were similar to, well, at least like the old school shapes, which you couldn't add any conditional formatting to it. There wouldn't be any options to pass stuff to it because it was a static object that just couldn't be affected by the model. I didn't realize you could actually push through an interaction to a shape. So,
well, I mean, that kind of, the thing is, it may well be that actually, there's no effect to this, right? Because as you say, there's no data.
And that's just the standard insert image type of image on the page, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it could well be that there's no, regardless, there's no data.
No the only thing I can think of is I would love to know if there's any ability for that to actually update, because the only type of image you can add is an actual file from your computer, right? I don't think there's no ways to insert image and then click a URL, which could in theory take a parameter. So I'd actually so this rule is good to turn off for sure. I'd even argue that that's something that, unless somebody could actually come up with a way that they can imagine they can click AdventureWorks female and have that image update, I think that there should just not be a connection in there, even from the UI perspective. They should just have that turned off entirely, because I can't imagine any scenario where that file will change. It's almost like a legacy artifact that just shouldn't even be there. That image should just be an isolated tick on the page, and it shouldn't blink, or do anything else when it updates. It's an unnecessary connection that I would hope would just actually get removed entirely.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know the answer to that, but I know that you can run this rule. So for example, just again, that should then highlight that specific image. So again, I'm fumbling a bit with my keyboard in here. So.
And in theory, this should increase performance a little bit, because it's one less query that's being updated every time the report page refreshes.
Right. And you see here, well, interaction test, we're highlighting this image because it is the target of an interaction, right, in our report definition. So you can find that out. Okay, so hopefully you're enjoying this. But another one that's really important is just to ensure that alternative text being defined for all visuals. So that is the important for screen readers, right? So each visual has a alternative text property, and you wouldn't want to specify something. So people who use screen readers can actually understand the report page better as they tab through various visuals. With that, we probably want to exclude the shape visual, because you don't want, it might get too noisy, I guess, if the shape visuals also mention something. Yeah, and so this is what we're checking, right? We're just checking for the alt text property, whether it's null or whether it's just an empty string. Yeah, that's what we're doing. And again, we've returned every visual that don't have the alternative text set. Yeah.
I imagine there's going to be, I'm hoping at some point we can incorporate Copilot or something else that can autofill the alt text with like a good description of the visual for accessibility reasons. Have a button where it can just do that. Imagine that as a nice, great feature to add to the future.
Yeah, completely. That would be amazing. Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to just move on to this. I know I'm just. What's interesting about PBI Inspector is that you can also check custom visual properties, and the Deneb visual. I don't know whether you've come across it. It's an amazing,
I love it.
Right? An amazing custom visual that essentially enables you to spec visuals using the Vega or Vega Lite, right?
Yep.
I guess you'd call it a library or something. And
exactly.
Yeah, but the thing is, in the report.json, it's pretty special to look at, right? Because it's nested JSON. Yeah. So if I were to search for in the report definition, okay, this is my. I didn't show you the page. Let me just show you what I mean. In my reports, I've got a Deneb page. Okay, and I've got quite a simple Deneb visual in here. If it will render for me. My machine seems to have gone a bit slower, but it's just all right. You can see it now. It's simply a bar chart. Nothing very interesting. In fact, it's probably doing Deneb a great disservice here because it can plot really amazing things. But if we look in the report.json, we have the standard escape JSON, right, for this visual, the Deneb visual, custom visual here. But you see, we got these triple wax or backslashes because the actual JSON specification for the Deneb visual is also embedded in here, right?
Oh, okay. I guess that makes so the Vega
double
language
nested
is built in. Yeah.
Let me show you that. If I can go and edit this Deneb visual. Hopefully it's going to come up. Yes, you see, this is in this case the Vega Lite specification for this chart, right? And interestingly, you see the bar mark here is its own mark in Vega Lite, right? And you can toggle whether it's showing a tooltip or not upon rollover. Right?
Well, it's an open source language, so these visuals, by the way, just for people tuning in, I've had Daniel on my stream and videos like 5 times. Love his tool. It's also there's plenty of websites with dozens and dozens of just copy paste, and all you have to do is basically change the value of any of these settings. So the opacity number, anything else. So you code, but it's really, really easy to make adjustments and build a bespoke visual if you want to. So I love Deneb so much.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yes. So, but what if you want to check the property of this visual, right? Well, with PBI Inspector, you can, and I'll show you how. So, for example, I just tried to find something before this call, something to show you around this, and I figured, well, actually, maybe you want to see, you want to enforce, or ensure that these visuals have got rollover tooltips, showing up.
Yep.
Yeah. In this case, I've set it to false, so it's not showing. And we want to be able to detect this in a rule, right? Okay, so let me show you that. So let's enable this rule. And right, first of all, again, we loop through each page and each visual within the page, right? And here we check that it's the Deneb custom visual. So I'm using a regular expression string to say it starts with Deneb, and then there's like a string, right, for each custom visual. That's what you get. So I can go back here. You see visual type is deneb with this long string here. Yeah. And so we use regular expressions to be able to match this. So we just, we know it's a deneb custom visual. Okay. And in here, you see I'm having to, I'm just trying to scroll to the right here. I'm having to use this so-called JSON pointer string to isolate the JSON spec for the, this one here.
Mm-hmm.
That's the JSON spec for the deneb visual, and then we drill through the layer array of the deneb visual JSON spec. So if I were to go back to my report in here, you see we've got a layer array, yeah, for the marks. And so you can do this in PBI Inspector, and here we just look for the each marks tooltip and whether it's set to true or false. In this case, we're checking for false, right? And we're going to return all the deneb visuals that have tooltip set to false on a mark. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so that's how it works. And because we've enabled this rule, and I'm going to save it now, we should be able to run this. Okay, so that's the previous rule, so ignore that. This is the previous rule. But here now you see the deneb visual has been highlighted as failing that tooltip rule. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I was saying, just for a little bit of fun, like you might have, I don't know if you saw this yesterday, but in relation to deneb, I'm just going to flip back to here and then we'll go back to the next role that you wanted to show. So recently got a new game deck. You might notice that there is Power BI kind of running on this, and deneb is in the corner actually. That's a Power BI report using deneb, and it's running Pac-Man in the deneb visual in a report on a mobile gaming console that I bought running Windows 11. So definitely a big fan of deneb. I feel like the perfect way to play a game on a gaming console is using deneb inside of Power BI desktop.
Amazing. So, okay, well, what is I got so much to show you. I'm just I'm conscious of time as well, but
if we go a couple minutes over, that's totally fine too. There's no hard stop.
Cool. Oh, another thing I wanted to show you. So we've got the new visuals, right? As of the 15th, like a couple of days ago.
Yes, the new by Miguel's team. We have the new card, more items for the card visual for KPIs, plus the new button slicer.
Right, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about, the button slicer. And I'm still, I'm getting to grips with, using it. But this is it at the top, so I'm not doing a very good job of actually formatting it. But this is it at the top, right? So let me just show you.
It's essentially filling the gap that the Qlik slicer used to provide. Like, it's full customization to create true buttons, just like the actual buttons do today, but in a slicer design. Right,
exactly. And you can see you can format, drop shadows on each of these buttons in this case, right? And rounded rectangles, right? And so if I go here and show you the various options in here, so for the shape, rounded rectangles, we can set the branding, right? All these attributes that you can set on these new visuals, and there's a lot of stuff in here. And I just wanted to show you actually, with PBI Inspector, you can also go and inspect these things, right? So this visual is in, I think, in preview at the moment, but because we got the JSON, we can go and specify a rule for that. So this is it. So again, it's disabled. So maybe if we want to run it, we can. Okay. But
out of curiosity,
we can go,
would you,
yeah,
for the rule that's fetching the number, would there be a way to tie the rule explicitly to what the theme formatter is set to? Because like there's a visual rounder that you can have turned on for all visual containers. And if that's set to 8 pixels, would you be able to grab that number and add it automatically, include it to this rule? Basically make sure they match. So whatever the rounding is inside of the slicer per button matches the same level of rounding that the theme default is set to.
Yeah, so that is so I can check the theme with PBI Inspector, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can check the report layout as well.
Yep.
But I need to do some work to combine the two. I think it's capable of doing it. It's just I haven't tried that yet. And so it's another great insight, and great thinking, of course.
Yeah.
It's kind of natural, but so
well, you have to basically grab it from another part of the code and then insert it in, reference it. So yeah, imagine a little work.
Yeah, exactly that. So but obviously that's what needs to happen, right? We need to be able to do that. But anyway, I just wanted to say, so this is what you can do for checking the roundness of rectangles, right? If you ever want to do that, at least it might be useful if you want to make sure that it's consistent throughout, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So again, we just we filter the visual types by this new so-called advanced slicer visual. That's what it's called in the JSON. And then we can use a JSON pointer string, to point to the value of the, rounded curve property, and just make sure that it's 18L. And actually, in the report that I've specified, it's 17. And so this should return again an error, right? So very quickly, let's try that. Running this rule again. Okay, so these are the previous rules, but this is the one that we just looked at now. And you can see that we indeed are highlighting this because we got it set to 17 and not 18. Right?
Yep.
That's what happened. Okay, so right, and I think we steadily getting to the end of the rules that I wanted to show you. Just for reference, you can check, as we mentioned, we can check the report theme as well. We just need to point to another file. And it's not completely useful at the moment, although you can do it. In this case, I'm just checking the report theme title from font properties. Foreground, it's a specific color, and to the font face, etc. So you can go and carry out these checks against the is there another against the report sort of theme file? That's another one that's quite interesting. I think I skipped. You can also, for example, ensure that your charts use theme colors and not custom colors, right?
And that's checking in. Would that check just the top primary colors or anything in the whole standard palette?
So what it does, right? It just checks to see if there's any hex value defined anywhere in your visual, a hex value pointing to a custom color. Because if you don't use if there's no hex value, you typically have an index reference to a color within the palette array, you see.
So if it's in the palette, that visual specifically does not have that hex code because it's just referencing the base palette. But if you do anything, okay, so you don't actually have to cross-reference it. You're just simply looking to see if there's an array value, or is it actually a hard, okay.
Yeah,
that makes it
this is a regular expression.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I've used in here. But this is really useful because using custom colors, right? It's a pain for many reasons, right? Because your report might be less accessible because you may not have well contrasting colors, but also from a maintainability point of view, just to correct that and use a theme color instead, can be a bit of work, but at least you can highlight them quickly like this. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
So these are types of rules that you can create. I just wanted to really expand a bit the conversation around what you can do with the command line interface, right, for PBI Inspector. Actually, I've got another interesting thing to show you. Sorry, before that.
Yeah, no worries.
So, okay. So until now, we've looked at rules, you know, that essentially test your report file, etc. And that's great. But something that PBI Inspector can also do is essentially report against, you know, just run a pre-process your file and return some metrics, etc., or, you know, visual properties in a nice layout, right, like a tabular layout, if you will, so that you can then report on your reports visuals and properties. So, you know, how many pie charts do you have, and you know, how tall, how wide the charts are, and many other things. Of course, you can run any type of custom rules to return, you know, the number of fields that are you know, specified against used by a visual, for example, etc. Right? But in this case, I've got this JSON that returns, you know, very, very high level properties of visuals, like literally visual name, visual type, X and Y coordinates, and width and height, right? But as we've seen earlier, you can run lots of other rules and computations, right? And I'm returning this as a JSON record. In fact, for each of them, so I'm returning that as an array of JSON records. Yeah, and I'll show you how that's useful. And the truth of the matter is that I don't really mind what the expected results is, right? All I do is I return a report, if you will, on the report. Okay.
Yes.
So
some kind of a summary. Yeah.
A summary, yeah. So for example, I'm just going to grab this. So instead of the read rules, we're going to have this rule here, right? And I'm going to return it as a JSON, okay? And yeah, and then I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so we already returned that. So let's have a look at it. One second. Can I just show it in the browser here? Okay, so you see now we've returned in the results actual, so we're no longer returning as a HTML, just returning as JSON. We've got an array of visual properties. Yeah, visual name, unique ID, that is, visual type, and then X and Y coordinate, width and height, and whether it's visible or not. Yeah.
Nice.
As an example. Yeah. And that is for each page. So this is the page name, etc. So of course, Power BI being what it is, you can point Power BI to this, right, and report on those results. So this is my example here, pointing to the same data, right, which I've tidied up a little bit, and that could be across. Well, we'll talk about it in a minute. Okay, so this is just against one report, but we'll see how you can then do that across, you know, your entire workspaces, and maybe even an entire tenant, right? And so, okay, so we,
I love visualizations and reporting for sure. I am curious why you picked the donut chart for that one.
Yeah, good question. In fact, it's showing me that I've got a lot of different visual types, but yeah, so, you know, of course you can then cross filter, right? And here we can, you know, slice the report by the card visuals, and then we can see which page in our report used the card visuals. etc., and have a a breakdown of detailed breakdown in here, right? So a very, very simple example, but just to show you that with PBI Inspector, you can actually create reports on top of your reports quite easily. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I mean, this obviously just helped give you a nice summary of everything. So curiously, like how plug and play is this? Meaning, with the outputs that this comes out with, have you considered kind of bundling just a really quick and dirty thing, something like this that just lets them connect to wherever the file containing this data export is, and then this just updates to it to give people like a starter kit for looking at some of this stuff?
Yeah, so it's that is a very good point. It'd be interesting, I think, to just output that to the lake, right? Those JSON files, just drop them in the Fabric One lake, yeah, and automatically write from maybe have that capability within PBI Inspector, enable you to just specify a connection.
Exactly.
But just talking about that, let me show you a brand new feature where you can actually export report definitions from the Fabric workspace, right, and run PBI Inspector against that. I think that would be quite an interesting use case as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I think both scenarios. I also think, as you mentioned, like having something that can connect up to the data published to the service, but also just like a local file. But letting people know that not only can they expect at the granular level, but also get summary breakdowns. And let them just modify the file from there. I think that will help to drive adoption of this tool for sure.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
You're basically having the 30,000 foot level and then the ground level for inspection.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, it's good feedback. Okay, so where are we at? Have we got any questions from anyone?
Not since the last one from Bernat, but I'll encourage people watching in. If you have any remaining questions as we start to wrap up here soon, feel free to drop them into the chat and I'll happily bring them back up onto the screen and we'll chat about those.
Cool. Okay. Let me then talk to you about this then. So very recently, we've had a new documentation entry, right, for the Fabric REST API. Yeah. And this is pretty cool because it explains that you can export report definitions from your Fabric workspaces, right, in PBIP format. Okay. Right. We won't go through everything on how to do that, but Ruri Romano actually has produced some really cool PowerShell commandlet that enables you to do this. So this is what the payload that's returned by that call, for you just return the report.json, and we're quite familiar with this now because that's what we've been looking at today. Yeah, essentially. Yeah, and let me show you Ruri's repository in here, and perhaps later on we can share the link. But essentially, there's a new, Fabric PBIP module that enables you to export items from a workspace. So you've published your report into the Fabric workspace, and you can go and call this, use these commandlets, export Fabric items, specify your workspace ID and the local path, folder path, right?
Exactly.
And get an export, right? And what's really neat, as an example, Ruri's using this and actually just running Tableau Editor BPA rules and PBI Inspector rules against the exported files, right? So I'll show you that example in here. All right. Let me just scroll to the top. Okay, so you specify, this is the folder. This is essentially, I've cloned Rory's repo that I just showed you, yeah, locally, and specify the workspace. There could be more than one, right? And I've got 2 reports in that workspace at the moment, and essentially you can see that Rory is downloading the Tableau editor executable and the Tableau editor rules, right? BPA rules, but also PBI Inspector, yeah, and the PBI Inspector rules that are published, right, in the repo. So these are the, again, download URL for PBI Inspector. That's the command line interface, right? And that's the base rules for PBI Inspector, which we haven't looked at actually, but they do exist there. And then looping through the workspaces, we just invoke these commandlet export fabric items, and yeah, and then I'm scrolling down to explain to you that when the item is a report, we want to run PBI Inspector against this. So PBI Inspector path, pass in the report path, pass in the rules path, and then specify in. I've modified Rory script to specify that the output format should be JSON. Yeah. And I've just run this, before the call, and I can show you the output for that in my local folder.
I'm just a big fan, definitely, of using like any kind of GitHub repository. Like it's nice to be able to fetch from cloud, and especially if it updates, it can automatically populate into here, just like the best practices analyzer. If you're scrubbing a URL to get that, so that makes it very easy to self-maintain.
All right, definitely. Yeah, and so here we are. This is the output from Rory's script in here, example script or test, and I'll show you the PBI Inspector output specifically. Okay, so we have 2 reports in our workspace, Fabric workspace, and we've run these tests against both the base test. And so I think I should be able to open this in Visual Studio Code to show you. One second, it's coming up. Yeah, and then format the document. Okay, so these are the rules that were ran on export, right? So we can inspect. What it means is that, for each of the base rules, this is a rule name. Remove custom visuals which are not used in the report. We can see that this rule failed because we got the aquarium, the fish custom visual, defined in the report but not used anywhere. Yeah. Reduce the number of visuals on the page, so that's failed again. For this page name on the report, yeah, this is a separate report I haven't showed you. I just wanted to show you the output, right? So you can have a JSON output of test results, and that's really useful because, again, you can point Power BI to the parent folder of those test results and create a report against all those test results.
And I don't know if you can find it in the file or not, but there's definitely been Power BI files where the visual doesn't show up on the list, but it's actually still in the file. I found that out the hard way trying to save a transform a file into a project file, and if you save it in too deep of a folder, some of those custom visuals have such a long string that you hit the Windows character limit for file path. But I've realized in older kind of legacy Power BI desktop files, sometimes in the past you could actually delete a visual from, you think you delete it from Power BI desktop, it's actually still in the file. There's still bits of it left as junk in the backend. You'd basically have to change the PBX to a .zip, go in, delete it manually, and to actually get rid of it entirely. But I'm wondering if there would be any way to detect the fact that it's not in the report layout, but there's still a file sitting basically in the back end of the PBIX that should have been removed, because it's one
And
level
this is
even
it, right?
beyond this. Well,
Yeah.
But that's the only way this shows up is if the icon is there. This actually means the icon has been removed. You've removed the custom visual from the file, but the file is still technically, the PBI viz file is still in the zip, the PBIX zip.
I hear you. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, because essentially the base rule, right, looks at this. It just looks at the top of this file. Not quite the top, not quite that far up. There's a lot of stuff in here. Yeah, you see here. This is we're not looking at the same report, but it's essentially the location that I'm looking at, or the rule is looking at. So you could have a custom visual reference in here that is not used in any of the report pages.
Yep.
So that's what I'm checking. But you could,
Gotcha.
you're right. You could be right in that in the PBIX or PBIP now, you could have files related to that visual, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm not checking for that.
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, so I think broadly this is what I wanted to talk to you about. I had another demo on the Git integration with PBI Inspector, but really this is all based on this documentation entry. It's actually a tutorial that shows you how to do that with both Tableau Editor and PBI Inspector, right? So the scenario is, let me get this right. You've got a workspace, Fabric workspace integrated with Azure DevOps, repo, and upon changes, upon pull request, somebody makes a change to a report or to the data set. Upon the pull request, you want to run a set of quality rules, right? Before you then merge the changes into the main branch. And so you can do this with in Azure DevOps pipelines.
Yep, exactly.
So maybe I can show you what I mean by that. So you see here, I've got a workspace with a number of reports and semantic models, right? It's integrated with Git, that is Azure DevOps, Git repo, this one is not committed yet, but that's okay. And in here, in Azure DevOps, I've got my repository in here. So I've got these two reports that are, this one report that has been committed. And if I wanted to run a pipeline as a quality check, you see, I've run this already. Let me show you what the pipeline looks like. Again, this is Rory's work mostly. I've just edited it. Yeah, it's very prolific.
He's a genius when it comes to coding, right? and building scripts. He's really good at scripts. Yeah.
Oh yeah, completely. So I'm kind of dependent on him really. But so I edited the script to remove the Tableau Editor element of it. The best practice rules analyzer against the semantic model, because I just wanted to focus on the PBI Inspector for this session. Essentially, we're doing something similar to what I showed before, but we're doing this within Azure DevOps, right? Again, we're downloading the binaries, we're downloading the base rules, and then we run the rules, right? And doing so, we're using PBI Inspector ADO output format, which are Azure DevOps logging command format. So that when that runs, okay. So I mean, we can run the pipeline, but I've showed you just 3 hours ago I've run it, so I can show you the output. So we've got a number of issues here. We've got one error because the Deneb custom visual is not using theme colors. Actually, I think it can use theme colors, but that's another story. But let me show you the example. So for some rules, we specify that we want to return, a warning if it fails, and so we got all these amber warnings. Might be a bit small.
Yep.
Can make it bigger, maybe.
The fact that it can go to DevOps is really nice because that can lead to automations, alerts, and a bunch of other stuff, which I think for the people who actually want to automate this at the tenant level, rather than running this report by report, I think this can go a long way to moving this to an administration level, not an individual dataset developer level.
Yeah, exactly. It's moving it to, this is, full DevOps, right? And,
Yep.
continuous development, continuous integration, and just ensuring the quality of the output, right? The quality of the main branch. Yeah. And here you see this red one, we're returning an error for that. All that is specified in the PBI Inspector test file, whether to return a warning or an error. And this essentially is going to prompt this pipeline to fail, right? As you can see, a red icon in here. So that's how you get warnings or failures within Azure DevOps, and that may mean that then the file won't get published to the next stage, maybe to prod, right? Because you've got an error, so it stops there. Okay.
Exactly.
Yes. So there we are, Reid. That was about it. I hope I didn't ramble on too much and took too many tangents, but
no, this is great. Like, I mean, I love digging into this, hearing, especially the end result. Like, that's definitely one of my favorite things. The fact that this can go full DevOps and integration, which, as far as I'm aware, that's one thing that does separate this from some of the other tools that are out there, either from the PBI Explorer and the PowerOps one, is the fact that this can integrate right into Azure DevOps, and it's scalable, which I think will be really good for people who want to deploy this. And like, yes, there's some coding involved, but by the time anybody's doing DevOps, that's already going to be something that they're familiar with, and they're used to taking the time to adding pipelines like this. So I think that part is going to make this something very useful for enterprise customers. Right.
And in terms of the coding, actually Rory's made his repo available, right? Via this link here. I think I shared it with you, Reid. The specific documentation entry. And so, somewhere there's a link there to Rory's repo, and you should be able to use that, pretty much directly to run both Tableau Editor, BPA rules, and PBI Inspector rules against your reports.
Yeah, I'm excited to try this out, and also the fact that I can recommend this. That was one until this call. I think I had either missed or forgotten the fact that it could be DevOps scalable. So I think at any point somebody is asking for a plug and play tool that can be integrated into their DevOps environment. I already have a couple of clients that I'd be happy to recommend this to. So appreciate you coming on and sharing this. I'm also I'll be very interested to see how the rules have evolved from both community input and inputs from other experts and MVPs in the next year. Because I'm sure you'll end up with a couple packages of list of the individuals' best practices that are uploaded on GitHub, or depending on the person that you like to watch the most on YouTube, or the blogger that you like to follow the most. I can see, like myself having one, people like Mike Carlo, Kurt Bueller, maybe Alistair, and some of the other people who love to do reporting and visualizations, or Kerry Kolasco. That was the other one I was thinking of from Australia. But I can imagine we all could eventually end up with a rule set that we would like to plug into these tools as our best practices, depending on whose ideology you follow most closely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great that's a great insight that you've given us there. And again, I guess the first step is just to log those ideas, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In the PBI Inspector repo discussion forum.
Excellent. as we wrap up, I just want to thank you for coming on, taking time out of your Friday evening for this. It's been a really good time, and I will happily have you back on again in the future as this continues to evolve, and I'm sure there will be new topics to discuss as we get even more powerful features built into it as far as what it can analyze.
Yeah, that's great. It's been really, really great. Thanks so much for having me on. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. Yeah, enjoy your weekend. Everyone else, enjoy yours as well. Continue to digest everything that Pass and Ignite has announced, and I'll just finish off by saying, we finally have Fabric in GA, so it is continuing to move forward and evolve, and I'm looking forward to all the other big announcements now in 6 months that Build will have once we once we get into the spring. So take care, and everyone have a great weekend.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships or our merchandise store for cool swag. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on your social media platform of choice to help our channel grow. So, until next time.